Most ghost stories begin with a legend. This one began with a lighthouse. It sits at the edge of everything, a place so remote that even now, reaching it feels less like a journey and more like leaving the world behind. There are no trees here, no villages, no roads, only rock, sea, and a silence that seems to have weight. And yet, for 3 men, this was simply home. Every evening, without fail, the lights swept out across the Atlantic, cutting through the dark to guide ships past rocks that had claimed so many before. It was a small, stubborn act of care, repeated night after night, for years. Then, in December of 1900, something changed. Something that, more than 100 years later, still resists explanation. 3 keepers, gone. Not one witness. No distress call sent, no struggle recorded, no bodies ever found. Only an empty station, a swinging door, and a silence that arrived and never quite left. In the decades since, investigators, historians, and the simply curious have returned to this story again and again, searching for the thread that ties it together. And still, no one has found it. Whatever happened on that rock has never been solved. The island has kept its silence ever since, and it's about to bring us closer to the night that silence began. The relief vessel reached the island on December 26th, 11 days after the lighthouse had first been reported dark. Waiting at the dock was no welcoming voice, no signal, no movement. Normally, one of the keepers would have been there, ready to greet the incoming boat. This time, there was no one. The relief keeper, Joseph Moore, began climbing the steep stone path. Later, he would describe an overwhelming feeling that something wasn't right. The main entrance was closed, but it wasn't locked. Their routine almost never changed. Trim the lamps, record the weather, keep the light burning. It was repetitive, predictable, quiet. Until it wasn't. On December 15th, a passing ship noticed something unusual. The lighthouse should have been shining, but it wasn't. At first, no one panicked. Storms often delayed supplies, equipment could fail. There were explanations. But days passed, and still there was no signal, no reply, nothing. Then a relief vessel was finally sent, and what its crew found would become one of history's greatest maritime mysteries. To understand what happened, we have to travel back to the winter of 1900. Nearly 20 miles from the Scottish mainland stand the Flannan Isles, beautiful but unforgiving. In those waters, storms could appear without warning, and once they did, there was nowhere to hide. That's exactly why the lighthouse was built, to protect sailors from these waters. 3 men lived there, weeks at a time, completely cut off from the rest of the world. Outside, investigators found evidence that the Atlantic had been unusually violent. A storage box, nearly 100 feet above sea level, had been damaged. Iron railings had been bent. Rocks had been displaced. To many, it looked as though the ocean itself had climbed the island. Yet, even if the storm explained the damage, it still couldn't explain where the men had gone. And that is where the mystery truly begins. At first glance, nothing seemed disturbed. The lighthouse itself was almost perfectly orderly. There were no signs of a struggle, no broken furniture, no overturned rooms. But investigators soon noticed something unusual. 2 heavy oilskin coats were missing. One was still hanging inside. Experienced lighthouse keepers almost never left the station without proper equipment. And according to protocol, At least one keeper was expected to remain inside at all times. If all three men truly left together, something extraordinary must have happened. Inside, everything was strangely quiet. The kitchen looked almost untouched. A half-finished meal sat waiting. A chair had been pulled back, as though someone had stood up only moments before. Yet there was no sign of the three men anywhere. The light had gone out. The keepers were gone, and the island offered no explanation. News of the disappearance spread quickly. Newspapers searched for answers. The public searched for something else. A story. The official explanation pointed toward the sea, a powerful wave catching the men while they worked outside. It's possible one keeper went outside, a second followed to help. Then the third broke protocol when he saw what was happening. It was a reasonable theory, but there was one problem. No one witnessed it. Others wondered if something more unusual had happened. Rumors began almost immediately. Some blamed smugglers. Others imagined spies or secret encounters at sea. As the years passed, the theories became even stranger. Giant seabirds, sea monsters, even the supernatural. They made fascinating stories. But there has never been credible evidence supporting those claims. That's often how mysteries evolve. When facts are scarce, imagination fills the silence. More than a century later, historians still debate what happened on those cliffs. And despite decades of investigation, one simple question remains unanswered. What could convince three experienced lighthouse keepers to leave the safest place on the island? More than a century has passed, yet the lighthouse still stands. Storms still arrive, just as they always have. Waves still strike the same cliffs. But the voices of the three keepers were never heard again. James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, Donald MacArthur. Three experienced men, remembered today not as legends, but as real people who disappeared. Every generation has tried to solve their story. Maybe the sea already gave us the answer, and maybe it carried that answer away. That's the strange thing about history. Sometimes the truth survives. Sometimes only the questions do. And perhaps that's why this mystery still feels so close. Because somewhere beyond those cliffs, beyond the wind, and beyond the waves, the final chapter was never written. Maybe it never will be. If you had stood on that island in the winter of 1900, what would you have believed? Tell us which explanation you think is most likely. And if there's another true mystery you'd like us to explore, let us know. Until next time, thanks for listening.